Greetings, I am Naledi Matlala, Project Manager at SICA, and I am pleased to present to you the series that focuses on post-implementation of the ISQM Quality Management Standards. With me today, I have Tarina Els, who is the Technical and Training Director at LEAF, who is here to share some of the experiences on implementation of the quality management standards, the challenges that have been experienced in implementing these standards, as well as some of the best practices that have been adopted or could be adopted to achieve effective quality management. Welcome, Tarina. Lovely to have you here.
Thank you very much, Naledi. Appreciate the opportunity.
You're welcome. I'll just start off with my first question, obviously around the challenges and experiences. So my first question goes, what were some of the challenges that you guys experienced in implementing these new quality management standards, and how were these challenges addressed?
Well, there were a number of challenges. And to start off, we struggled with the concept of the policies and procedures because there's actually not a specific requirement to have a policy document, but IRBA requires firms to have one. So it is difficult to distinguish between what should be included in what policies and procedures should be included in a policy document as opposed to responses recorded in a risk register or as procedures in templates or annexures. We are actually still in the progress of addressing it, as it requires continuous adaptation of the format and content of the policy. The next challenge we had was different ways that documentation is being evaluated by the different departments of IRBA, because inspections look at it, then also registrations and also ADP inspections. And the best thing that best way we could address that was to take care in communicating properly beforehand with a relevant representative of IRBA to ensure that when you submit documentation that it meets their specific requirements. Then thirdly, we also experienced challenges in terms of the awareness of responsibilities, especially an example that comes to mind would be engagement partners' responsibilities on audit files in terms of their reviews as opposed to engagement quality reviews. And what we've done to address this, we developed appropriate templates which include logical areas for review by the different parties, significant risks identified, areas highlighted by the manager, areas highlighted by discussions with the client, and also a review of the financial statements. And this was to prevent that lack of documentation or documentary evidence of review and considerations in terms thereof. When we talk of reviews, also when we think of the scope of monitoring reviews, there was also challenges because did you cover everything you were supposed to in the monitoring review? And what we've done to address that specifically was to expand and update our monitoring review checklists to include all scenarios possible as far as we can, and possible unique scenarios relevant to that particular audit client's engagement and environment. The last thing also attached to the monitoring reviews, especially, you can see that was an overall area that we picked up, was the timing of engagement monitoring reviews. Because when reviews are not performed in time before the close of the monitoring cycle, the quality leader runs into problems with evaluating engagement quality. And the best way to address that would to have regular monitoring reviews more often than what the standard requires, until that particular parties reach the required level or acceptable level of engagement quality. Because if that doesn't happen, and if engagement quality isn't monitored regularly enough, then what happens in terms of training and responding to root causes that were identified and implementing the required remedial actions. So a lot of work has been put into improving the timing of these monitoring reviews.
Okay. From that, we can see that it requires ongoing monitoring, ongoing adaptation. So it's not just the once-off process. Thank you, Tarina. This now takes me to my second question, where we're going to talk about what were some of the lessons that we have learned on the implementation of these quality management standards.
Well, I would say the biggest lesson learned for everybody involved would be the change of mindset that is necessary to completely grasp the purpose and detail of the ISQM requirements, in that they, when properly implemented, contribute not only to audit quality, but also to staff morale, client engagement, and overall business efficiency. Conversely, the firm that does not completely embrace the implementation of a proper system of quality management will not be sustainable in the near future. Another lesson that we specifically learned was that a structured and organized approach with proper timelines for activities set out is crucial to complete and efficient implementation.
Okay. Now we see that quality is the future of auditing. I know our regulators is very passionate about quality. Now, if I look at the future, how are the firms incorporating these lessons into their day-to-day operation?
Well, we have assisted firms to incorporate it into their daily operations. Firstly, we have ensured that there's very strict adherence to the timelines attached to completion of responses to quality risks, as the frequency of these responses relate directly to the risk that was assessed for that particular firm. So it becomes quite important to get that right. And also, we've assisted firms and reminded firms the whole time to ensure that a proper root cause analysis is done, especially for each engagement monitoring review, and that there's real strict follow-up of the remedial actions to ensure that quality does improve.
My next question now. Do you think that the firms were sufficiently prepared to implement these standards?
And that is the million-dollar question.
No.
Definitely. As a consulting firm, Leaf was mostly prepared even before ISQM was there, because actually ISQM 1 and the related standards enhance what was already contained in ISQC 1. It's a different approach followed, but it's overall the same objectives. So Leaf's methodology and the way we assisted firms were already mostly in line, but we did make some adaptations closer to the time for the implementation date. But the clients, the audit firms, some firms were ready, but many firms are even now still adapting to the new requirements and getting used to this change in mindset that is required of them.
Change in mindsets, right? I guess that's what we can say, that looking back at that time when it was introduced, it's something that we need to adapt going forward and do differently, change our mindsets about what quality is. My next question, Tarina, what do you think are some of the best practices that have been adopted or could be adopted when implementing these quality management standards?
Well, I think the first one, and I again believe it's one of the most important ones, is making the responses to quality risks part of the normal running of the audit practice. So part of the normal procedures and not something different and unique, because then it will become a habit of doing the right thing in terms of the standards. Although another best practice that I believe is important is prompt action on identified threats, ethical threats, training needs, and methodology needs identified throughout.
That's wonderful to hear. We are now almost 2 years post-implementation of the quality management standards. What can we say are the key elements that are required for effective monitoring within the quality management standards?
Well, I would say that there should be real, proper, independent monitoring of the entire process, ensuring that not only documentation is up to date that is supposed to prove implementation, but that there's actual proper verification of the procedures that were performed to prove, not only to prove compliance with the standards, but that the processes did really take place that were supposed to. So if there's not a proper independent verification, like a mini audit, if you want to use that analogy, of what was done, then monitoring has not achieved completely its purpose. So I would say that's the biggest thing.
Okay. We focused a lot on the quality management standards, the best practices and the experience. Now, if we are to feature in leadership and governance, do you see any change in the firm's leadership and governance structures as a result of implementation of these quality management standards?
Well, I think in the larger firms, you might have seen some changes. We focus a lot on the SME sector. And what we've seen is that overall the structures and governance did not necessarily change that much, except for the communication and the risk assessment part, because that is emphasized a lot and brought out as separate components in ISQM 1 and related standards. We could see that definitely pulled through into the structures, into leadership, into the way firms deal with the standard and how leadership deals with the standard. So I would say those are the two areas where I could see the change.
Okay. Now we're almost at the closing of the standard, and I just want to touch on the objective of these new quality management standards. The objective of that was to enhance the robustness of a firm's quality management system. What are some of the practical ways where you've seen that the system has improved within the firm?
Well, again, I'll focus on risk assessment and communication, because those are where we did see matters change and areas change. So the thing is, the requirement for the risk assessment process, for example, causes a firm to apply good business principles. And that forms part of good governance. So generally, I believe that improved the robustness of quality management systems in general, and that's definitely an improvement that I saw overall.
Okay. And then lastly, Tarina, we're almost there. Lastly, the quality management standards aimed to strengthen aspects of quality management for individual engagements by focusing on identification, assessment, and responses to quality risks. Are there any practical experiences where you have seen this in the quality management process?
Well, actually, the area where I've seen it the most was where it's become very clear now that the monitoring results need to be communicated to engagement teams. So that empowers engagement teams to respond to quality risks, in effect identified related to similar files or the same file in the previous year. And that helped a lot in terms of responding to risks. Firstly, identifying, otherwise the engagement team would not necessarily have known what to improve on. So the overall general communication, and then specific to the engagement that they're on, it helped a lot in terms of identifying and responding to that. And what was also interesting that touches on engagement level was there was improved communication from engagement teams identifying issues and risks and starting to communicate these issues really to their leaders on audit quality. So that enabled the leaders to assess the risks and determine what would be the appropriate responses. It was interesting though in smaller audit firms, because there's already a lot of communication to and fro because of the small structure and working closely together. That, yes, it was there, but it was not as big of a change as it was with the slightly larger firms or medium-sized firms, where we could clearly see those communication lines helping firms to identify and assess and respond to the risks at that level.
Thank you, Tarina. It was lovely to have you here. Thank you once again for sharing the insights and some of the best experiences on post-implementation of the quality management standards. My key takeaway from this is that effective quality management requires ongoing monitoring and adaptation. And I see a lot that communication is also improving amongst team members, which is key to achieve that quality results. Thank you once again.
Thank you.